The second topic that we are going to discuss is greatest common factor. And in greatest common factor, essentially it's a very self-explanatory term in that you're looking for it's always the greatest or the largest, whatever you want to say it, number that is a factor of and I'm going to use the very mathematical term set, but a set is just a list of numbers or a group of numbers of a set of numbers. So when we find this, there are really two methods of doing it. There's the reverse division, which is what I'm going to go through and solve these problems using. And then you can also use prime factorization. Essentially for both of these, what you're trying to do is you're instead of just being able to look at the list of numbers, which sometimes you can. Sometimes you get a number like 18 and 24. Well, it's really easy to look at those two numbers and think, oh, well, 6 goes into both of those, and there's nothing bigger than that. So 6 is the greatest common factor. But it's not always that easy. So both the reverse division method and the prime factorization method are a systematic way of identifying smaller numbers that are common, meaning all these numbers have that small factor in common, and then once you find all the small ones they have in common, you multiply them together, and that gives you the biggest. So the first example is 48 and 84. So using the reverse division method, what you do is you plug in 48 and 84, you make your reverse division bar, and then all you do is look at the numbers, and different than the prime factorization we've done in the previous video, you just want to find any factor that goes into both of them. And the bigger the factor you can find, the quicker you can solve the problem. So for instance, it may be that you just notice that they're both even, and that's enough to say they're 2. And so let's just do it that way. And so you get 24 and 42. And then now you look at 24 and 42 and say, wait a second. I know my multiplication facts well, and I know that 6 times 4 is 24, and 6 times 7 is 42, and so I have 6 that goes into both of those. So that leaves me with 4 and 7. I look at the 4 and 7, and there is nothing that goes into both of those. So I've identified numbers, 2 and 6, that go into both 48 and 84. So my greatest common factor is just the product of those two numbers, so 6 times 2 is 12. And so the answer to that question is 12. So we do 144 and 252. We're going to go through the same process. And you go through and I look at these and I can see that 2 goes into both of them. And again, if you notice things that are bigger, then that's great. I notice 2 goes into both of these. Usually as your numbers inside your reverse division get smaller, this gets easier. 36 and 63, well, if you know your multiplication by 9 well, you know that 9 goes into both of those. And so you're left with 4 and 7. Remember, the greatest common factor are the things that went into both of the numbers, well, that's 2, 2, and 9. The 4 and the 7 are what's left over. We'll talk about that in a second. So the product of 2 times 2 times 9 is just 36. And so the greatest common factor of 144 and 252 is 36. Now, using this reverse division, if you ever wanted to find the least common multiple, if you're doing 2, like this one is, these two problems are just 2 numbers, not 3 or 4 numbers, then your least common multiple actually always turns out to be the product of all the numbers. So in this case, it would be 12 times 28, the one on the top, because you got 2 times 6 times 4 times 7, and this one would be 36 times 28. Kind of ironic that I had 28 on both of those. But it just turns out that both of those would be the LCM. So in 2 numbers, doing this reverse division actually gives you both the greatest common factor and the LCM, or least common multiple. All right, the third problem, this has got 3 numbers. When you're doing greatest common factor, it has to go, for it to be a greatest common factor, it has to be a factor of all 3, which means it has to go into all 3 of them. Starting out, I can see that 2 is going to go into all 3 of them. And for some of you, this division process might take longer than it's taking me, but I've done a lot of division in my life. But the better you can get at that, the better off you are. I see another 2 for sure goes into these because they're all even. That's always the easiest thing to notice. It looks like another 2. That's going to give you, and it looks like even another 2. And so in this case, the greatest common factor is the product when you do 2 4s together, 4 2s together, and 4 2s multiplied together equals 16. So the greatest common factor of those is 16. With 3, the least common multiple gets more confusing. This one, because these 3 have no common factors, it is just multiplying all the numbers on the outside. But if there's any 2 of those that have things in common, then it gets more complicated. But you can look into that on your own at a later time.